for a long time, studying a lot of the more spiritual aspect of astrology, I kept thinking, okay, I just should not want this, or I need to just, be spiritual and then, let go of my desires and let go of these things. And I think there's a balance with it, not being over attached to my desires, but also understanding that I have needs, and that we all have needs, and that we want these things. It's okay to want these things and to not be stoically pushing them away, but to also be doing the work of self-awareness and understanding and awakening, so that we can become good partners. And if we have an attachment style that's challenging, so that we can become more secure, so that we can work on these things, right?
An attachment style that's more challenging.
I'm sure there's varying degrees of it.
That's cute.
Well, I mean, because I've taken the tests, and through all of these years of reading and researching and understanding, now I'm coming up as a secure attachment style. But in the past, I think I've had both anxious and avoidant situations. So
yes. Yeah. I was really avoidant with my current husband. For many years, I was that way with him. It just wasn't the right time, really. Right. And I needed to grow a lot, seriously. I thought his secure style was boring. Yeah. Now I think it's hot. Right. But years ago, it was just, he was like, steadfast, consistent, reliable. He was interested. He was there. And I'm like, I don't really feel that much here. Mm-hmm. Instead, I'd been programmed in some ways for that, what you call the excited misery, right? Mm-hmm. Never knowing where the relationship is, never knowing where you stand, never knowing what's going to happen, and never actually getting anywhere secure at all. It's like, so that is exciting, right? That's romantic. Mm-hmm. No, I don't see it that way at all. Now I see that as not being the least bit romantic. Because romantic is, that's one of the things that really surprised me the most about being married, because I had a really bad opinion about marriage. In fact, I decided for many years I wasn't going to ever get married. Mm-hmm. Of course, a lot of people say that when they get married, right? But what surprised me was the moments that you can have as a married person that can be called romantic. Like having a kiss over with the laundry basket between you. Whoever would have thought? Right. That there can just be all these moments that are just great. They're great. Mm-hmm. And you know each other really, really well, right? Mm-hmm. Which is supposed to kill romance. Mm-hmm. It doesn't.
I'm wondering about, astrologically, what dasha you were in when you weren't interested, like what that planet was talking about, and then what you had moved into when you got more interested and felt more drawn to that secure style.
I was in my Saturn period. I was in my Saturn.
You were in your Saturn period, right? So you're like...
In my 12th. Uh-huh. Right? In my ascendant Lord, right? Well, the 12th is like the house for nuns. Right. And, people who commit their lives to
God.
Mm-hmm. And I actually considered doing that at one point. Mm-hmm. Obviously did. And, I did. In fact, when I was in the Navy, which is still amazing that I ever did that, but I was in the Navy, and I spent all my spare time studying spiritual things. Mm-hmm. And it was like being in an ashram. I didn't have to worry about what to wear because I had a uniform. I didn't have to worry about food, right? Because the cafeteria. I didn't have to think about worldly things except showing up to work and doing my job. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I got to basically live like a nun, and I did. Mm-hmm. And it was great for a while. But, the longings of the heart.
Yeah, you're probably happier now.
Yeah.
Happier now than when you were in the...
I think so. I really think so, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so interesting. So do you want to start looking at charts?
Sure. That sounds
I
great.
have a few brave people who gave me their birth data, though I think, well, yeah. Um, I do want to look at this one chart I told you about, because I've been looking at it and I'm thinking, okay, so how is that showing here? It's not showing the way I would expect it to.
Right.
And like, so this person is a classic avoidant person. And probably if he took the test, he would say, yeah, that's me. And as you can see, he has Rahu in the first house. So that tells you right away that he's here for self-development
Sure.
first, right?
Oh, yeah.
A2 South Node of the Moon in the 7th. So in previous lifetimes, he did partnership a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then plus having Jupiter in the 7th, which is interesting. He has a swan yoga here. The interesting thing about that is that that can really prevent marriage. Prevent it or postpone it for quite a long time.
Because there's too much Jupiter in that house.
Something about that is, I'm not sure, I don't know if I really understand it, but that's what I've seen, and it works. Now,
well, right there, what you just showed, what you just pointed out is Rahu in the first house. I mean, that right there shows it's interesting too, because one of the things that I had been thinking about and contemplating when we were talking about this is how do Rahu and Ketu come into play in attachment theory? Because what we're seeing is that Ketu is going to be our security paradigm.
Right.
You know, K2 is definitely maybe going to represent somewhere, some way that we are attached, right? And that we're moving into the Rahu.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
And you know, he's a person who I would say I could describe him as somebody who was trying on different identities, at least when I knew him. Like when he got involved in any kind of a hobby, he just went full on into it. Like he'd get all the equipment, all of it, and just like totally immerse himself in it. And he did that with several different things. It was like part of discovering who he was. Now, he has Mars by cusp in the 4th. And Mars in the 4th, that's a very independent planet, is not relationship oriented.
Right.
Totally independent, and would represent somebody who needs independence emotionally. But it's ruled by Venus, so you know, it's not a really Marsy Mars, but it is opposing his Makaraka, Saturn, which is ruled
by it's Rashi aspected by Rahu and
yes.
by Ketu.
Yes.
And by Jupiter, so that can be confusing for that Mars.
And Venus here is in a great friend sign, and it's with Mercury. That's a nice combination. And I have to say, he has a lot of great qualities, this guy. Very intelligent and fun and funny, active, always like to be doing stuff all the time. Introduced me to all kinds of wonderful things. Really opened up my world big time. I went to my first art gallery with this person.
Oh, wow.
My first really nice restaurant with this person. Went on a lot of trips and stuff. So, you know, that activity, that need for activity, is nice. So, I mean, I guess these are kind of obvious things, I suppose. Saturn, too, is a loner. The Makaraka planet is a loner. And it's ruled by Mars, which is that soldier, you know, that independent quality. And then aspected by Rahu as well.
Aspected, the Rahu Saturn thing is an interesting combination there. And I was also looking to see how, you know, how strongly his Saturn is influenced by the sun, or the sun is influenced by Saturn, because I think those two planets in combination can also bring a detached sort of aloofness, thinking that the person, that person might think they're not responsible for things, right?
Yeah. Well, 32 out of 60 points.
Yeah. So
some. And if you look at the Navamsha, look at the Navamsha.
Saturn's really strong
there too.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. And anyway, and in the sign of Capricorn, what Jaimini has to say about that is that it's a very sensitive person. Someone who probably needs a lot of alone time simply because they're so sensitive they can feel all kinds of things going on around them, not just like the feelings of the people around them, but even things from other dimensions, like entities and things like that. So
yep,
the extremely sensitive emotions.
The Rahu-Saturn combination brings that, and also that strong Jupiter-Ketu in the 7th house could probably make that person really sensitive to other people as well.
Yeah.
Other people's emotions.
Yeah. I have to say that he was quite sensitive, and could be really kind, in spite of the Virgo moon, which can be very critical. And he was very critical, but it was all that pushing away stuff. But not entirely, because I think just the nature of Virgo is such that they really are trying to help you. I mean, that's the motivation, until they learn that there's a better way to do it. I think that's what they do. They're like, they see a problem, or they see something that could become a problem, and so they inform you about this. It can feel bad, if you take it personally, rather than how they mean it. They're trying to help you, but when they have an avoidant attachment style, they're trying to keep distance between you. And
sure.
It works really well. It does. It works really well. Though first it just makes you feel, you just always feel like you're not good enough. And
the person's not necessarily conscious that they're doing it. They're not conscious that this is what I'm doing, this is my strategy, this is why I'm doing it. They're just feeling it out. They're just responding in the way that to them feels the most normal and natural.
Yeah.
They're not.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's not on purpose.
Yeah, no, it is. I imagine that it is quite unconscious. Because somebody with a Virgo moon who can be sensitive to other people's feelings probably would feel bad if they knew how bad it felt. You know what I mean? And I do know too about this person's background. There were some severe traumas in childhood, and parents, or divorced parents, alcoholic father, unrecovered mother, and his siblings also similarly affected. None of them had children. One married and got divorced. Another one didn't marry. He and his brother have never married. So it was pretty intense, actually. And you can see the fear of being, entangled in something that you can't get out of.
Yeah, I'd like to look more at fourth cusp things too, and fourth lord things, to see what could be playing out in the attachment style stuff, because I think that fourth house is really showing a lot of that foundation for certain.
Here's a person who has the anxious attachment style. I mean, to a large extent, who has more of the secure now, but was really insecure for a long time. And there's K2 there in the fourth, and this technique, just like the capacity astrology, it's not the Gemini stuff. It's not necessarily sign-based. We do look at the cusps for this. So K2's there, so that means it's automatically aspected by Rahu. Right? And then Rahu aspects the moon too. And then the moon aspected by Mars and Saturn.
Yep, the moon is aspected by Mars and Saturn.
Also Jupiter, thank goodness. 56 out of 60 points, so that's there too.
And you can see if we're not looking at the cusp, but we're just looking at the Bhava yogas, we can see that, that Venus is combust there by the sun. It's interesting to see. There is a lot of stuff going on here in the fourth house, and the sun being the eighth house lord, not the eighth cusp, but the eighth house lord there.
Right.
That could bring some challenges in that early, in that kind of the explosions or the kind of feeling that things are going to change a lot in the early development.
Right, because these are movable signs.
Yeah.
There is a lot of change.
There's a lot of change.
And Venus in a Mars sign. So, witnessing basically abuse, different kinds of abuse in the parental relationship, and experiencing a lot of abuse as well. So, yeah, I guess that makes sense for sure, just even going by the sign.
Now, it would be really hard to look at a chart and just peg it for what attachment style does this person have. We're really doing this kind of in hindsight and looking at it and seeing. It's going to take a lot of research to see if we correlate these types of things. But it is really, it's super interesting to look and see.
So let me ask you something. Wouldn't you say that Rahu moon, Rahu fourth house is automatically anxious? Because of the Vata?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting one, because I had definitely looked at some Rahu moon stuff, and I think that there would be some possibility towards anxious, but I think it could be a possibility towards avoidant as well, because that Rahu moon, you may not want to feel your emotions. It's probably going to be an impact from other planets that lets us know that what sign it's in, what house it's in, what the Lord of Rahu is doing, all of those things that can show which way that might go. But I think that with Rahu moon, there could be more of a tendency towards the insecure aspect and in the first part of life than the secure aspect, because that moon is going to show that influence from Rahu, which is going to bring some sort of impact to it.
Yeah, I can see it going either way, for sure, because the Rahu moon, Rahu fourth house thing is about trust. Being able to trust yourself, trust life, trust the other person, and there's a real hard time with that.
Yeah,
and I see it going either way, and maybe even a combination of the two things.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah,
I've seen people who have Rahu in the seventh, where they have a really hard time with relationships at all. I've seen people married with it.
Right.
People not even be able to get into a relationship at all, let alone get married with it. And always have relationships that are, okay. Like I have a client who has Rahu and Mars in the seventh, in Aries. Okay. So just having Mars in the seventh is a marriage prevention yoga. That prevents marriage just by itself. And his relationships are always with people in other countries, and like he doesn't even get to meet them.
Right, foreigners. Rahu in the seventh is definitely foreigners.
But they never get together. They never even meet. Though there have been some relationships with people in the local area, but something always gets in the way. And there's never actually, like he's never been married, and he's how old is he now? Late 60s, I believe, maybe early 70s. And he wants to. Well, he says he wants to, but he can't seem to make it happen. Now, is he avoidant or anxious? I mean, the chart is saying you're not going to get married no matter what you do. And that's been the case. So what's that? Which is why I think that knowing what your relationship karma is can help you, whether you ever, get the relationship you want or not.
Well, I mean, is he avoidant? Is he anxious? Or is he working on becoming more and more secure? And that maybe that, that security, it works in our consciousness, and on a bigger level than just our physical manifestation during our lives. But if we're really here working on something, whether or not it means we get married in our 60s or 70s or at the end of our life, who knows what he's working out karmically. If he has a yoga that's going to prevent marriage, his karma doesn't mean that he's not supposed to be working on himself, or that he's supposed to be learning about new ways to be in relationships.
He is doing that. He's a very conscious person.
Yeah.
He's definitely aware.
Yeah.
In many ways, I think he would make a great partner.
Yeah.
And, he's still alive, so there's still hope. You never know. You don't actually have to get married to have a relationship.
No.
There are people who are better off actually not marrying based on the condition of their navamsha versus the condition of their sapsamsha. So you don't really know where you're at until you get into a relationship. Because, I remember when I was single and I'd done all this inner work, therapy, 12-step programs, reading books, keeping journals, you name it, thinking, okay, I'm ready. I'm good now. And then getting into a relationship and finding out where I really was. It's like, well, okay, so you've made progress in this area, and this area, and this area, but man, this hasn't changed at all.
Right. Right. Back to the drawing board.
That's right. But the best way to work it out is in the relationship.
Yeah. Well, that's why we should be looking at all our relationships as gifts, even though they may not go to marriage or, for the long haul. They're teaching us something. They're either teaching us something or we're burning off karma somehow. We're burning or growing.
Right. Okay, I got this chart from Bhavna yesterday.
Okay.
She prepared it for our study. And she said this person has been married and divorced and is now really negative about marriage. She's like really down on marriage.
Okay.
And hasn't been in a relationship for a long time, actually, and is not really like seeking one.
Okay.
So, of course, what do you notice? Tell me what you see.
Well, I see they have K2 and Mercury in the first house together, and that Mercury is ruling K2. So the Lord of K2 is with K2. So a lot of times when you have the Lord of the node with the node, it's, especially when we talk about Rahu and K2, we're talking about K2 as something we're going to have to resolve or dissolve or let go of. But when the Lord of K2 is with K2, it doesn't always work that way. It's like that Lord is there with K2 saying, you're still working on this thing. It doesn't always work the same way as just a K2 with a Lord in a different sign. So it's always interesting when I see that one.
Yeah, and Rahu's in the 7th house of relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So
which is creating that disturbance or that challenge.
Right.
But I think that it's that Mercury that's there, the Lord of the first, in the first house, Lord of K2 in the first house with that this person is still sort of riding on their K2.
Right. And self-development, because Virgo is the ascendant. Yeah. Self-development is a big part of this lifetime.
Now, this person is also in a Rahu Dasha.
Interesting.
And they're going to go into Rahu Jupiter, which is the 7th Lord.
Yeah.
coming up in the future. So never say never.
Oh, won't that be interesting? Because then, I mean, because what Rahu wants you to do, it's really hard to get out of it.
Yeah.
Right? He'll drag you kicking and screaming.
He will. He'll drag you, but sometimes we'll have the grace to, move into a Rahu time period or a Rahu dasha, and we'll be inspired to work on that in our lives. The universe will set us up for working on something.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I see Mars here too. There's Mars in the fourth again, by cusp and by sign.
Mm-hmm.
And aspected by Rahu as well, and Mercury.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not an easy place for Mars. Again, the inner emotional life, Mars having a strong need for independence. And then look at the Atmakaraka, the sun.
Right.
The sun is a loner.
In its own home.
You're right. The 12th, right?
In the 12th, it wants to be alone.
Yeah. And then the moon is there, combust.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably thinking, because when the moon's with the sun, that person always feels like they're not living up to their potential.
Right.
So he's probably thinking about all the things he needs to get done before he dies. And he probably sees relationships as an interference.
Mm-hmm.
And because they are. They're very time consuming.
Yeah, if that's not our main goal or our main agenda, and we're here to be focusing on self-development, there's nothing wrong with not being in a relationship. I mean, that's the thing. It's not, that's maybe different than the way our culture is set up, but they could be really healthy,
Yeah, we kind of have a double bind going on in our society. Kind of like, well, there's always someone else. You can always get divorced.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, if you're single, you're kind of shamed for being single.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an easy position.
No. Yeah, always keeps us wanting to consume more. Get out there and do something more to make it better.
Right. I have to say that was probably one of the most liberating things I read in these books. And that is that my normal desires are normal. I mean, my desires, the ones that I consider to be something like you were talking about, always trying to not need, not want.
Mm-hmm.
And
let go of our desires, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. And then it's nice to find out, well, it's kind of normal to want those things. And it's okay to want those things. Right. It's human to want those things. And I'm like, well, that's nice to know.
Right. And, in this chart, too, I see Venus is in the sign of Cancer. And there's no way that hands down and Venus inside the Cancer is going to be one way or another. But Venus does get starved by the moon when it's in the sign of Cancer. It does get thirsty, which can lead to a challenge potentially in relation. So that's another, you see several things. I see several things lining up. It's not like you can just see one thing in the chart, but it's interesting to pick apart, okay, what would these look like? But that's interesting.
Mars in the fourth is a Kuja dosha, which is using Mars healing arena. And if a person doesn't know about that, I can see that being a big factor in pushing someone away.
The Kuja dosha, for sure.
Yeah. Like he can be madly in love with his partner and yet be using Mars right and left, in ways that you're not supposed to use Mars in relationships, like, telling them how to live their life, giving unwanted advice, being logical when what they want to hear is a feeling. If you don't know that, you can just be really trashing your relationships and not realizing it when your motives are good, because Mars, he wants to fix things, right? That's his job.
Yeah.
And he's thinking, I'm loving you. This is how I'm loving you, right? Right. Woman's going, oh, for God's sakes, will you stop being so logical?
Right. I mean, yeah. And it can go the other way around too, I'm sure.
Right, or he'll say something like, well, that's a dumb feeling.
Right.
That's not logical.
Right.
That's the big mistake that men make. And if they have Mars like this, that's the kind of thing they'll do all the time. And they'll be very impatient with feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Until they understand what's going on, then I think, then they're more likely to say, well, okay, there is this whole other side to life. And why I'm attracted to women is because they have this emotional nature that connects me to my heart. So obviously there's some value to it.
Mm-hmm.